Welcome to the History AI podcast, where the past comes alive with facts, anecdotes, and a dash of humor. Here are your hosts, Chuck and Marco.
Hey history buffs. Welcome back to another episode of the History AI podcast. I'm Chuck.
And I'm Marco. Today, we're diving into one of those historical legends that has everything: ancient Egypt, lost princesses, epic migrations, and, of course, Scotland.
That's right. We're talking about Scota. Was she a real Egyptian princess? Was she a myth? Or was she a little bit of both? Buckle up, because this one's a wild ride.
Yeah, and honestly, if you thought Cleopatra was the only Egyptian woman making waves, you're in for a surprise.
Alright, let's set the stage here. To understand Scota, we need to dive into one of the most fascinating intersections of ancient history and myth. The legend of Scota is a tale that spans continents, from the sands of ancient Egypt to the misty hills of Ireland and the rugged highlands of Scotland.
That's right. So, who exactly was Scota? Well, according to medieval Irish and Scottish sources, she was the daughter of a pharaoh, but which pharaoh? That's where things get complicated.
And by complicated, we mean a tangled mess of conflicting accounts. Some versions of the story claim that her father was Pharaoh Nectanebo II, the last native ruler of Egypt, who reigned from 360 to 343 BCE.
Nectanebo II is an intriguing choice because he's the last of the Egyptian pharaohs before the Persian conquest. According to some legends, he was a sorcerer who fled Egypt after being overthrown. That's where some storytellers connect the dots. They say he took his daughter, Scota, and escaped to foreign lands.
But that's not the only version. Other accounts, particularly those found in the Liber Gabala Iren, also known as the Book of Invasions, identify her father as Pharaoh Sincris. This version is less specific and more mythical, placing Scota in a time much earlier than Nectanebo II.
And let's not forget about the Greek connection. In some variations, Scota is said to have married Goidel Glass, a Greek prince or nobleman. Goidel is credited with inventing the Gaelic language and leading a group of followers, the Milesians, to Ireland.
Right, and that's a pretty epic migration story. The Milesians were said to be the final group to settle in Ireland after numerous waves of settlers. And Scota wasn't just tagging along, she was portrayed as a powerful, almost regal figure who played a vital role in uniting these people.
But wait, it doesn't end there. After arriving in Ireland, the story says that Scota and Goidel faced fierce resistance from the Tuatha De Danann, a mystical race said to have ruled the island.
According to the legend, a great battle took place, and Scota was killed in the fighting. Some versions say she was buried in County Kerry, in a valley now known as Scota's Glen or Glen Scoithin.
And that's not the only burial claim. Another version says she was buried near Tralee, where a stone, said to be her grave marker, still stands today.
And then there's the Scotland connection. After her death, the tale goes that her descendants traveled to what is now Scotland, where they established the kingdom of Dalriada. Over time, these settlers became known as the Scots, named after Scota herself.
So, when we talk about the origins of the Scots, we're not just talking about some random group of Celtic warriors. We're talking about a people who, according to legend, traced their lineage back to an Egyptian princess.
Which, let's be real, is quite a claim. Imagine the storytelling power in that, connecting a small, rugged kingdom in the north of Britain to the splendor of ancient Egypt. It's a narrative that would make anyone feel like royalty.
And that's why the story of Scota persisted for centuries. It wasn't just a tale of migration, it was a tale of origin, identity, and a royal connection to the ancient world.
But was any of it true? Or was Scota just a convenient invention from medieval chroniclers looking to create a grand, heroic lineage for the Scots?
Exactly, we've laid out the basics of Scota's story, an Egyptian princess who somehow ends up as the mother of the Scots. But where exactly do these tales come from? Are we talking about credible historical records, or are we knee-deep in medieval fantasy?
Excellent question. The earliest and most influential source for Scota's story is the Liber Gabala Iren, also known as the Book of Invasions. This text was compiled by Irish monks in the 11th century, but it's based on much older oral traditions.
And when we say based on, we mean loosely based. The Liber Gabala Iren is essentially a blend of myth, pseudo-history, and biblical allegory. It's not exactly what we'd call a reliable historical record.
Yeah, and that's a key point. The monks who compiled these texts weren't exactly historians in the modern sense. They were chroniclers with a mission, to legitimize the origins of the Irish people by connecting them to biblical and ancient lineages.
Which brings us to one of the most intriguing aspects of Scota's tale, the biblical connection. The Book of Invasions claims that Scota's husband, Goidel was a descendant of Noah through his son Japheth.
Right. And that's a pretty convenient lineage to establish if you're trying to position your people as part of the grand biblical narrative. It's like saying, hey, we didn't just show up here, we're part of the same epic story as the Hebrews and Egyptians.
And that's not the only text that tells her story. The Historia Brittonum, attributed to the Welsh monk Nennius in the 9th century, also includes a version of the tale. But this version is even more fantastical, featuring elaborate genealogies that connect the Scots not just to the Egyptians but to the Trojans as well.
Exactly. According to Nennius, the ancestors of the Scots were supposedly descendants of a Trojan named Brutus, who wandered through Europe before settling in Britain. It's like they were trying to collect every epic origin story available, Trojan War, biblical flood, Egyptian royalty, and roll it all into one.
And let's not forget John of Fordun. In the 14th century, Fordun was one of the first Scottish chroniclers to explicitly connect the Scots to Scota. His work, Chronica Genti Scotorum, took the Irish legends and gave them a distinctly Scottish twist.
Fordun wasn't just retelling the Irish myths, he was reshaping them. By emphasizing Scota as the direct ancestor of the Scottish people, he was establishing a royal lineage that extended back to ancient Egypt.
And in doing so, he was also creating a powerful political narrative. Scotland was embroiled in conflicts with England at the time, and what better way to assert Scottish sovereignty than to say, our ancestors weren't just ordinary settlers, they were descended from pharaohs.
And then Walter Bauer, another Scottish chronicler in the 15th century, takes Fordun's narrative and expands it even further in his work, the Scota Chronicon. Bauer adds even more detail to Scota's tale, turning it into a kind of national epic.
But let's be clear, by this point, the story is more myth than history. There are no contemporary Egyptian records mentioning Scota, no archaeological evidence linking her to a specific pharaoh, and no credible documentation of a large-scale migration from Egypt to Ireland.
And that's the kicker. The sources we have, the Liber Gabler Ren, Historia Brittonum, Fordun's Chronica, and Bauer's Scota Chronicon, are all medieval texts written centuries after Scota supposedly lived.
Plus, they were all written with a specific agenda, to legitimize the rule of certain Irish and Scottish kings by tracing their ancestry to grand, even divine origins.
So, was Scota a real historical figure? There's no solid evidence. But her story served a very real purpose. It was a tool for constructing a national identity, a way to anchor a people's origins in ancient, illustrious history.
And that's a powerful thing. Because even though the story may not hold up under the scrutiny of modern historiography, it still carries a cultural weight that resonates even today. Alright, so we've covered the literary sources, texts that blend myth, pseudo-history, and political propaganda. But let's get down to the hard evidence. What does archaeology say about Scota and her supposed migration from Egypt to Ireland and Scotland?
Spoiler alert, not much. Let's start with Ireland. According to the legends, Scota and her followers landed in Ireland and settled in the southwestern region, specifically in County Kerry. This area is dotted with ancient burial sites, standing stones, and cairns.
And one of the most well-known of these is Scota's Glen, or Glen Scoithing, near Tralee in County Kerry. There's a stone slab there that locals claim marks Scota's grave. It's known as the Fert Scota, or Scota's grave.
But here's the thing, that stone is ancient, yes, but there's no definitive evidence linking it to an Egyptian princess. In fact, the site likely predates the period when Scota was supposedly alive.
Exactly. Most of these standing stones and burial cairns are from the Bronze Age, well before Nectar-Nebo II or any of the other pharaohs said to be her father. Archaeologists have found human remains and burial goods at some of these sites, but nothing that suggests a royal Egyptian connection.
And it's not for lack of trying. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, there were several attempts to excavate the area and uncover artifacts that could substantiate the Scota legend. But those digs turned up nothing conclusively Egyptian, no hieroglyphs, no sarcophagi, no distinctive artifacts that would clearly indicate an Egyptian presence.
And that brings us to Scotland. If Scota's descendants supposedly travelled from Ireland to Scotland, you'd think there'd be some trace of them in the archaeological record.
And yet, once again, we come up empty-handed. There are plenty of ancient sites in Scotland, hill forts, stone circles, and Pictish carvings, but there's no sign of a distinctive Egyptian influence.
Now, that doesn't mean there weren't migrations. Archaeological evidence does suggest waves of settlers moving from Ireland to Scotland, particularly during the early medieval period. This movement was primarily led by the Scoti, or the Gaels, who eventually established the Kingdom of Dalriada.
And the name Scoti is significant. It's tempting to connect it directly to Scota, but linguists argue that it's more likely derived from the Latin term for the Gaelic-speaking people, not a single royal ancestor.
But what about the so-called Egyptian-style artifacts some claim to have found? There have been sporadic claims of Egyptian beads, amulets, and other artifacts found in Ireland and Scotland.
Are these evidence of Scota's journey?
Not exactly. The majority of these supposed Egyptian finds are actually Phoenician in origin. The Phoenicians were master traders and seafarers who traded all over the Mediterranean and Atlantic coasts. It's not surprising that some of their goods ended up in Ireland and Scotland.
And even then, those items are rare and often disputed. Most of them are simple beads or trinkets that could easily have been traded through intermediary cultures like the Greeks or the Iberians, not necessarily brought over by an Egyptian princess.
There's also the question of DNA. In recent years, genetic studies have shed a lot of light on ancient migrations, including the influx of Celtic and Gaelic populations. But so far, no genetic evidence has suggested a specific Egyptian lineage among the Scots or the Irish.
And considering how distinct Egyptian DNA markers would be compared to the Celtic and Norse genetic profiles common in these regions, it's something that would likely stand out in genetic analyses.
Now, to be fair, the absence of evidence isn't necessarily evidence of absence. We can't conclusively say that Scota didn't exist. But based on what we know, the archaeological and genetic records don't support the idea of an Egyptian princess establishing a royal line in Scotland.
And yet, the story persists. Why? Because it's not really about evidence, it's about identity. The myth of Scota connects the Scots to ancient Egypt, the Bible, and Greek myth, creating a rich, multi-layered origin story that gives the Scots a royal, even divine, lineage.
And that's the power of a good origin myth. It doesn't need to be true to be meaningful. But the fact that so many people still talk about Scota today shows just how deeply these stories have embedded themselves in the cultural psyche.
Absolutely. Alright, so if Scota was probably not a real princess, why does her legend persist?
It's all about identity. Think about it, the Scots wanted to distinguish themselves from the English. What better way than to say, hey, we're descended from a mighty Egyptian princess?
Plus, it connects them to biblical stories, Greek mythology, and ancient Egypt. It's like the ultimate origin story mashup.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that history isn't just about what happened, it's about the stories we choose to tell and why we tell them.
Which brings us to the modern day. Scota's legend still pops up in everything from local folklore tours to genealogical claims.
And while we might never find solid evidence that Scota was a real historical figure, her story is a fascinating example of how myths and legends shape national identity.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. What do you think, folks? Was Scota a real princess, a powerful myth, or a little bit of both?
Let us know on social media. And while you're at it, don't forget to drop us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us grow and bring you more epic tales from the past.
And hey, if you have a topic you'd love to hear us cover, shoot us a message. We're always looking for fresh stories to dig into.
Oh, and don't forget to check out the new merch. We've got some awesome designs that pay homage to ancient legends like Scota. Link in the show notes.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Stay curious, stay epic, and we'll catch you next time on the History AI podcast.
Of Egypt, a princess stands with eyes like fire, a sword in her hands. daughter of kings, but destiny calls to a land of green hills and mist-covered walls. She sailed the seas with a warrior's pride, left behind Pharaohs, a queen now denied, but faded, whispered in the wind and the foam, Scota, your heart will find a new home. From the Nile to the north, her legend grows, where the heather blooms and the river flows. Scota, mother of the Scots, blood of kings and battle-taught, with fire in her veins and a kingdom to claim, the highlands echo her name. Scota, mother of the Scots, from desert sands to mountain tops, a queen reborn where the wild winds blow, a warrior's heart forged long ago. Her sons rose up like eagles in flight, with swords like silver they shone in the night. She taught them to fight, to never kneel, with courage like iron and hearts made of steel. Through wars and whispers, through blood and rain, her legacy echoes in every slain. They sing her name where the thistles grow, in the hills where the ancient winds blow. From the Nile to the north, her legend grows, where the heather blooms and the river flows. Scota, mother of the Scots, blood of kings and battle-taught, with fire in her veins and a kingdom to claim, the highlands echo her name. Scota, mother of the Scots, from desert sands to mountain tops, a queen reborn where the wild winds blow, a warrior's heart forged long ago. They say her ghost still roams the glen, where the kings were crowned and the battles began. A queen without a throne, but a kingdom to give through her sons, her spirit still lives. Scota, mother of the Scots, blood of kings and battle-taught, with fire in her veins and a kingdom to claim, the highlands echo her name. Scota, mother of the Scots, from desert sands to mountain tops, a queen reborn where the wild winds blow, a warrior's heart forged long ago. Scota, Scota, the mother of kings, her legend flies on eagle's wings, from Egypt's sands to Scotland's stone, a queen who carved a throne of her own.